大家好，欢迎大家来到雷雷扑克。今天我们开始一个新系列 MMAsherdog 在 PokerStars 高额现金桌的经典手牌赏析，取材自他本人的 YouTube 频道。大家可以听听大神狗哥是如何复盘的。
如果大家喜欢我的视频，记得长按点赞3连哦。
可能还是有新观众不熟悉 MMAsherdog， 我们再介绍一次。他来自荷兰，真名伍特比莫斯。接下来我们就将他亲切地称为狗哥。在2018年被 Educa Poker 排在了6人桌最强者的第8名，新派高额桌玩家的代表人物，打法严密，风格平衡。狗哥除了打牌之外，也运营自己的 YouTube 频道。本期视频就来自狗哥对自己在 NL4万级别的手牌复盘。这期手牌他的对手是去年刚刚创造中国扑克历史的藏书奴，他在传奇扑克的100万慈善赛中夺冠，豪夺过亿人民币的巨额奖金。大佬在几年前的 PokerStars 高额桌十分活跃，留下了很多经典对决，其中也包括今天要分析的这手牌。
So it's 200, 400 no limit. I think it was just a regular table, so you can buy in for max 40k. So we have Vice Corvin, who is an old school Swedish reg, who doesn't play too much online. We've got OTB, who's the GOAT of No Limit Hold'em. We've got Vegeto89, who is a good player as well, a Spanish player. He also doesn't play too much anymore nowadays, but back then he was playing every day. Chao Ren is an online poker legend. He's been around since the early 2000s, I think. And Aaron, I actually played with Aaron last year in Vegas in a 200, 400, 800 session, but at the time I didn't know it was him. He's a Chinese player who's actually pretty good. So here we have a big one. So Aaron opens to 1100. Vice Corvin folds. So at the time, this was 3 years ago. I was always three betting 9-8 suited. I'd seen that this guy had been way too loose, also folding a lot of 3-bets and also just being quite tight. So I decided to 3-bet here. I would say nowadays I would just end up folding. I think this is a little bit too loose, but under the right circumstances, right? I mean, if he's opening 40% in the cutoff, that's almost a button range, right? Or let's say he's over folding, he doesn't 4-bet, or he just makes mistakes, then it might make sense to 3-bet here. But yeah, this is normally too loose, I would say. Okay, he calls, and we get a 10-10-4 flop. This flop is not necessarily really good for us, but it's also not bad for us. But remember, we have all the queens plus, and he probably doesn't. So, we have 10-9 suited, Jack-10 suited, etc. He probably does too. So, yeah, this board doesn't change too much. We both have some flush draws. Pocket fours, if anything, he's got more often than we do. So, I think we can still be quite aggressive here. And we can bet this board quite often. So, 9-7, we have no showdown value and a flush draw. So, this is generally a good hand to be betting with. I would have liked a slightly larger sizing nowadays, but again, this was 3 years ago. So if you see me make a questionable play, that's probably partially because the metagame back then was different, and we just had less knowledge of the game. So when you see like high stakes poker hands, I try not to shit on people because they played those hands 10, 15 years ago, right? So had we played back then, we would have also been way worse. Anyway, Aaron calls, and the pot is already quite big. It's already 13k. So we get the ace, which is a great card for us. Obviously, we're going to have more hands like aces, ace king, ace queen, whatever. He will have a bunch of those too, but we're going to have hit it more often. So I think we can be quite aggressive here. We unblock hands like, for instance, queen jack of hearts that just have to fold now. Again, we really desire full equity. So you could check here sometimes, but I think in this specific situation, betting is often the play, not always. So I bet. You see, I don't bet too big because the pot is still quite dry, right? If the board is more wet, maybe I'll go a bit bigger. But there's really almost nothing to protect from other than the flush draw on the paired board. So we get called, and the river is a jack of clubs. So, honestly, I remember what I was thinking. I was like, I'm actually not that happy. I was actually debating a check call. I mean, obviously, I'm never check folding. I was debating a check call versus a shove, right? Because I think he can have some hands like, for instance, ace-high flush draws that now have an ace-high flush. He can still have pocket jacks, maybe. He can have hands like king-queen of diamonds, clubs, sorry. He can still have some random full houses, like maybe jack-10, ace-10, pocket 4. So when I shove here, I'm not getting called by that many worse hands, to be honest, because it's unlikely as a lower flush, so he has to mostly call me with a 10 or with a hand like ace-king or ace-queen. So in the end, I decided it was very, very close. Checking, what does it accomplish? Well, if you have a hand like ace-king, maybe you want to check as well here, right? So you don't always want to check fold. So you're checking like a weaker flush here might make sense, hoping he turns a hand into a bluff like... what does he turn into a bluff here? It's actually hard to say, because if he has an ace, he's not bluffing. If he has a jack, well, if he has jacks, he's obviously value raising, right? So, value betting. And I don't think he's just floating the queen jack of hearts on the turn either. So, he would have to make like a thin call on the turn with like 4 or 5 suited, let's say, and to then turn it into a bluff, or make like a thin call with a hand like, well, king queen even got a straight. So, he can turn hands like, pocket eights, etc. into a bluff. But he's not going to have them too often, right? Because he's probably just folding them on the turn. So it's not that easy for him to come up with bluffs, to be honest. And I think if he does have a hand like, for instance, ace-4 hearts, he should just check down. Probably lose, but sometimes win. He could, of course, value shove a 10 once I check, and I do beat those. So I ended up shoving. Pretty close, but I went for it. And he called within like 5 seconds. I was like, oh shit, he probably just has like, a bigger flush or something like that. Like for instance, ace queen of clubs, ace 5 of clubs. But he showed up with ace king, and I won a big one. So that was pretty nice. So as for his play, ace king is sometimes a 4-bet, sometimes a call, so don't really mind that. Obviously easy flop call with the showdown value, the overcards, etc. Turn easy call. On the river, it's kind of the same, He's kind of got the same conundrum where I'm not bluffing with that many hands, right? Because king queen got there, the flush got there. If I have hands like ace king, obviously, I would have hands like ace queen beat. So I would have to turn a hand like queen jack, for instance, into a bluff. I would have to have a hand like 5-4 suited, let's say, to turn into a bluff. It wouldn't be that easy to find bluffs. So I think his call is quite loose, but it's okay, If you were to put this in a solver, it'd probably say side call. Well, solvers only call or fold. They don't side call, but if anything, you should side call this one. So, yeah. Now we should rate the play. My play, I would say 7 out of 10. The 3-bet is questionable. Even shoving the river, it's fine. But again, I should even consider a check call. I could even consider a turn check. So, I think I just had low EV on every single street. But I happened to win the maximum. I think his play is a 7.5 out of 10.
大家会给大佬的这手牌打几分呢？把你们的分数打在弹幕上吧。这手牌我跑过软件，大佬如果转牌是以 GTO 建议的范围跟注的话，跟注频率在 70% 左右。那么合牌成花以后，狗哥的全压频率有 15%， 价值范围是草花 K9S 以下的所有同花牌，也就是说同花牌只有 AX 和 KQS 会过牌，其他都会下注。炸胡范围是带草花的口袋对9和狗哥反复提及的54S。面对狗哥的全压，大佬大概需要防守 45%， 防守范围还是比较宽的，带草花的口袋对 Q、AKO、AQO 都有跟注频率。因为这里草花 A 和 K 都没有阻挡狗哥的炸胡范围，所以大佬可以用带草花的 AKO 跟注，不带草花的 AKO 弃牌。当然，狗哥的认知中，大佬翻后偏紧，所以转牌防守不足。根据狗哥描述的范围，大佬的跟注频率会在 50% 左右。所以大佬跟注到合牌的范围很强。在合牌成花以后，狗哥的全压频率只有 4%， 价值范围是草花 K9S、98S、97S 的同花牌。这里的手牌 97S 全压没有问题。当然狗哥通常会避免使用频率极低的行动线，所以他会觉得这里全范围过牌更合适一些。同花牌中的其他 AX 和更小的同花都是过牌。炸胡范围是带草花的 KJO。面对狗哥的全压，大佬大概需要防守一半，大部分集中在3条 TX 以上的牌里。因为这里草花 K 阻挡狗哥的炸胡范围，所以大佬只能用带草花 A 的 AKO 跟注，放弃用带草花 K 的 AKO 跟注。这里不带草花的 AKO 也在 0EV 的跟注范围内，也就是所谓的含泪跟注。
这期的视频就到这里，如果大家喜欢我的视频，记得长按点赞3连哦。下期再见。
又到了恰饭时间啦！上次给小伙伴推荐的番前查询工具反响热烈，扑克终结者团队再接再厉，根据小伙伴们的反馈，博采众家之长，一口气推出了另外3款工具。 这次我们介绍一下既可以单独使用，也可以和番前查询联动的番前训练工具。训练开始时可以选择位置和场景，比如我们这里练习按钮位的番前范围场景选择3bet， 枪口位公开加注 ，Hijack 做了3bet， 我们在按钮位手持口袋对 Q 的行动，这里应该是加注 ，OK 正确。我们也可以查询一下在这个场景下我们还有哪些牌可以加注的，点一下查看范围。这里可以看到口袋对 Q 以上 AKO、AQS 以上都是100%做4bet，KQS 和口袋对 J 都是大约一半的频率做4bet。因为带强抓的盲注结构，有效筹码相对抵值的比例非常低，所以番前显得尤其重要。希望这款工具可以帮助大家尽快掌握番前范围的基准。另外，开发团队这次还有全新的番后查询及训练工具，都是无需设置，开箱即用，希望可以帮助大家降低学习番后 GTO 策略的门槛，提高学习效率。如果大家有兴趣进一步了解这次推出的新产品，可以访问扑克终结者网站或者加微信直接咨询开发团队。